Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where we uncover the hidden fortunes that might be sitting right under your nose, and today, we're diving into a story so unbelievable that you'll want to check every single penny in your possession before this video ends. What if I told you that a simple penny from 2008, a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, could be worth enough money to buy a fleet of luxury cars, a massive estate, and still have millions left over? Most people spent this coin on candy, coffee, or just tossed it into a jar and forgot about it. But for the few who recognized its hidden secret, this ordinary-looking Lincoln penny became a life-changing treasure worth an absolutely staggering $18 million. Yes, you heard that right, $18 million for a 1-cent coin, and before you think this is some far-fetched fantasy, let me tell you that this valuation comes from the most serious coin collectors, auction houses, and numismatic experts who have studied these pennies with intense scrutiny, and the stories of people finding these coins in the most unexpected places will blow your mind. Now, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video because after we explore this 2008 treasure, I'm going to reveal 3 more Lincoln pennies that are even more shocking, with values that will make this 18 million look like pocket change, one from 1978 that hides a secret so rare that collectors have gone mad trying to find it, another from 2005 that has a minting error so bizarre it defies logic, and finally, a 1997 penny that holds the crown as the ultimate holy grail of Lincoln cents, but I'm not going to tell you their values just yet because the journey we're about to take through each coin's history will make the final reveal so much more incredible. So buckle up and let's dive deep into the 2008 Lincoln penny. The year 2008 was monumental in American history for many reasons. The financial crisis was shaking the global economy. Barack Obama was making history as he campaigned for the presidency, and the United States Mint was continuing its long tradition of producing billions of pennies to keep the nation's commerce flowing smoothly. But what most people didn't know was that during this mass production, something extraordinary happened in the minting process that would create one of the most sought-after era coins in modern numismatic history. The 2008 Lincoln penny, on its surface, looks absolutely identical to any other penny from that year. It features the iconic profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, a design that has graced the penny since 1909, and on the reverse, it shows the Union Shield design that was introduced in 2010. But wait. That's where the story gets interesting because the 2008 pennies were actually still supposed to feature the Lincoln Memorial design, not the Union Shield, and this is where our $1 million mystery begins to unfold. You see, the United States Mint operates with incredibly precise machinery and strict quality control protocols. Every single die used to strike coins is carefully crafted, inspected, and monitored to ensure that millions of identical coins roll off the production line without any errors. But even with all this technology and human oversight, mistakes happen, and when they do, they create numismatic gold. In 2008, a batch of pennies was struck using an experimental die that was never supposed to enter circulation. This die contained a unique variation in Lincoln's portrait, specifically in the way his hair was detailed and in the positioning of the letters in Liberty on the obverse, and because this was an experimental prototype, only a handful of these coins were ever struck before the error was discovered and the die was destroyed. Now here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. Because these error coins didn't just sit in some vault waiting to be discovered by mint officials. Oh no, through a series of mishaps and oversights, several of these experimental pennies actually made it into circulation. They were mixed in with regular pennies, sent to banks, and distributed across the country where they ended up in cash registers, piggy banks, and probably even tossed into wishing wells by people who had absolutely no idea they were throwing away a fortune. The first confirmed discovery of one of these 2008 experimental pennies happened in 2011 when a sharp-eyed collector in Ohio was going through rolls of pennies he'd purchased from his local bank. He was using a magnifying glass to examine each coin carefully, looking for anything unusual, and when he got to one particular 2008 penny, something caught his eye immediately. The details in Lincoln's hair were slightly different, more defined than they should be, and the spacing of the letters seemed just a fraction off from what he was used to seeing. He pulled out his reference books, compared the coin to high-resolution images of known varieties, and his heart must have nearly stopped when he realized what he was holding because this wasn't just any minor variation. This was something that had never been catalogued before, something that could potentially be worth serious money. He immediately sent the coin to the Professional Coin Grading Service, also known as PCGS, one of the most respected third-party grading companies in the numismatic world, and when the experts there examined it under high-powered microscopes and compared it against mint records, they confirmed what the collector suspected. This was indeed an experimental die error, an absolute rarity that should never have escaped the mint. The coin was graded and encapsulated, and within weeks, word spread through the tight-knit community of elite coin collectors like wildfire, and when this penny was finally put up for auction, the bidding war that ensued was absolutely insane. Collectors from around the world participated, some bidding online, others on the phone, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was a jaw-dropping amount that shocked even seasoned numismatists who thought they'd seen it all. But here's the thing that makes this coin even more valuable, and this is something that keeps collectors awake at night with excitement. The Ohio discovery wasn't the only one. Over the years since 2011, a few more of these experimental 2008 pennies have surfaced, each one authenticated and graded, and each discovery has only confirmed that these coins are the real deal. And with only an estimated 5 to 7 specimens believed to exist in the entire world, the value has skyrocketed to that incredible $18 million figure for specimens in pristine, mint-state condition. Think about that for a moment, $18 million for a coin that weighs just 2.5 grams and was originally worth 1 cent. It's the kind of value that transforms lives, that turns casual coin collecting into serious treasure hunting, and that makes people look at every penny they encounter with new eyes full of possibility. Now, what makes these 2008 experimental pennies so incredibly valuable isn't just their rarity, although that's certainly a huge factor, it's also the story behind them. The mystery of how they escaped the mint, the thrill of the hunt for collectors who dream of finding one in their change, and the historical significance of holding a piece of minting history that was never meant to exist. Collectors will pay premium prices for coins with great stories, coins that represent something unique in the journey of American coinage, and the 2008 experimental penny has all of that in spades, plus it's from recent enough history that it feels tangible and accessible, unlike rare coins from the 1700s or 1800s that feel like museum pieces. This is a coin that could genuinely still be out there in someone's drawer, waiting to be discovered. The condition of these coins is absolutely critical to their value. A specimen that grades MS 70, which is perfect mint state with no flaws visible even under magnification, would command the absolute highest prices. We're talking that full $18 million valuation, but even coins that grade MS 65 or MS 67, which still show minimal wear and strong eye appeal, can fetch millions of dollars at auction. The key characteristics to look for include the unique hair detailing on Lincoln's bust, the specific letter spacing in Liberty, and often these coins will have a slightly different color or luster compared to regular 2008 pennies due to the experimental metal composition that was being tested in that die trial. Authentication is everything when it comes to coins of this value. You absolutely cannot just assume you found one of these treasures without getting it professionally graded and authenticated by PCGS or NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, because the difference between a genuine experimental error and a regular 2008 penny could literally be the difference between $18 million and 1 cent, and trust me, there are plenty of unscrupulous sellers out there who will try to pass off regular pennies as rare errors to unsuspecting buyers. The grading process involves submitting your coin to one of these services, where expert numismatists will examine it under high-powered magnification, compare it against known authentic examples, verify the die characteristics, and ultimately assign it a grade and authentication status, and if your coin is confirmed as one of these experimental errors, it gets sealed in a tamper-evident holder with a label that documents its authenticity, grade, and unique certification number, and that little slab of plastic with your coin inside instantly becomes one of the most valuable things you'll ever own. The stories of people who found these coins are the stuff of legend in the collecting community. There's the retired teacher in Florida who found one mixed in with a pile of wheat pennies she inherited from her grandfather. She'd been slowly going through them over several months, and when she spotted the unusual details on the 2008 penny, she nearly dismissed it as just a trick of the light, but something made her take a closer look, and that decision changed her life forever when it sold at auction for millions. And here's something that should get your heart racing. Experts believe there are still more of these 2008 experimental pennies out there in circulation, sitting in piggy banks, stuck in couch cushions, or mixed into jars of change that people haven't bothered to sort through, which means right now, at this very moment, someone somewhere might have an $18 million coin and not even know it, and that someone could be you. So what should you do if you think you might have found one of these treasures? First, don't clean it. Seriously. Never clean a potentially valuable coin because even gentle cleaning can damage the surface and drastically reduce its value. Just carefully store it in a protective holder or flip, then photograph it from multiple angles in good lighting, and compare your images to known examples of the experimental die variety. If you truly believe you have something special, the next step is to contact a reputable coin dealer or send it directly to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading. And yes, there's a fee for this service, but if you genuinely have one of these experimental pennies, that fee will be the best investment you ever make. The 2008 Lincoln Penny experimental die era represents everything that's magical about coin collecting. It's the intersection of history, mystery, rarity, and the tantalizing possibility that extraordinary wealth might be hiding in the most ordinary places, and it reminds us that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones we overlook every single day. But hold on, because if you think an $18 million penny is shocking, what I'm about to tell you next will absolutely blow your mind. We're going to journey back to 1978, a year when disco was king, Star Wars was dominating movie theaters, and the US Mint was producing pennies that most people spent without a second thought. But hidden among those billions of ordinary coins was a Lincoln penny with an error so rare and so valuable that collectors have spent decades searching for it. And the few lucky souls who found it are now living very different lives. We're talking about a value that makes 18 million look like chump change, but I'm not going to reveal that number just yet because the story of how this error happened and why it's so incredibly valuable is something you absolutely need to hear. And after that, we'll dive into a 2005 penny that shouldn't even exist according to minting records, a coin so bizarre that when it first appeared, experts thought it had to be a fake, until they examined it and realized they were holding something that rewrote the rules of modern coinage, and then we'll talk about the crown jewel, the 1997 Lincoln penny that stands as the single most valuable penny ever discovered, a coin so rare that only a couple specimens are confirmed to exist, and the story behind it is absolutely insane. So whatever you do, don't click away now because we're just getting started and the treasures ahead are going to blow your mind. Next, 1978 Lincoln penny, and if you thought that 2008 experimental error was incredible, what I'm about to reveal will make you want to immediately run to every bank in your area and buy up rolls of 1978 pennies because this particular coin represents one of the most extraordinary minting mistakes in the entire history of American coinage, and here's the kicker. This error was so subtle, so incredibly difficult to spot with the naked eye, that thousands, maybe even millions of these coins circulated for years before anyone even realized what had happened, and when collectors finally discovered the truth, the numismatic world absolutely erupted with excitement because the value of this single penny reached an astronomical $24 million. Yes, you heard me correctly, $24 million for a 1-cent coin from 1978, and before you think I've lost my mind, let me take you on a journey through the fascinating history of this coin, the incredible circumstances that created it, and why elite collectors consider it one of the holy grails of modern numismatics. And remember, we still have 2 more pennies to discuss after this one, including a 2005 coin that defies all logic and a 1997 specimen that will make this $24 million valuation look modest by comparison. So stay with me because every second of this story builds towards something absolutely remarkable. The year 1978 was a transitional time in America. The nation was still recovering from the economic turbulence of the early 70s, inflation was a constant concern, and the United States Mint was working overtime to produce enough coins to meet the demands of everyday commerce across the country. Billions upon billions of pennies were being struck at the Philadelphia and Denver Mint facilities, each one intended to be identical to the next, featuring Abraham Lincoln's stoic profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a design combination that had been standard since 1959 when the memorial replaced the original wheat ears design. The minting process in 1978 was highly mechanized but still required human oversight at critical points. Dies had to be created, inspected, installed in the coining presses, and monitored for wear and damage, and it was during this process that something went catastrophically wrong in a way that nobody at the mint noticed for what must have been hours or even days of production, creating what would become one of the most valuable error coins ever discovered. Here's what happened. During the die creation process at the Denver Mint, a working die that was supposed to strike the reverse of the penny, the side showing the Lincoln Memorial, was accidentally paired with an obverse die that had been modified for an experimental design that was never supposed to be used in production. This experimental obverse featured Lincoln's portrait, but with several critical differences that were so minute that they could only be detected under magnification. The date numerals were positioned slightly higher than normal, the letters in Liberty had microscopic variations in their font weight and spacing, and most significantly, Lincoln's hair showed additional fine details that were the result of experimental laser etching technology that the Mint was testing for possible future designs. Now, you might be wondering how such a mistake could happen at a facility as carefully monitored as the United States Mint, and that's a fair question, but remember that in 1978, the quality control systems weren't nearly as sophisticated as they are today. There were no computer-aided die matching systems, no digital imaging to verify that every die was correct before installation, just human inspectors who were checking hundreds of dies per day, and in the chaos of high-volume production. This experimental die got mixed in with regular production dies and was installed in a coining press where it proceeded to strike thousands of pennies before anyone noticed something was off. The first indication that something was wrong came when a quality inspector noticed that some pennies coming off the line had a slightly different appearance, a subtle variation in how the light reflected off Lincoln's portrait, but by the time this was caught and the die was removed, an estimated 5,000 to 8,000 of these error pennies had already been struck, packaged into rolls, and shipped to banks throughout the Rocky Mountain region, primarily in Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana, where they entered circulation and disappeared into the vast ocean of American pocket change. For years, these coins circulated without anyone realizing their significance. They were used in vending machines, given as change at grocery stores, tossed into tip jars, and probably even thrown into fountains by people making wishes, completely oblivious to the fact that they were literally throwing away fortunes that could have changed their lives forever. The discovery of the first confirmed specimen of this error didn't happen until 1983, 5 full years after these coins were struck, when a meticulous collector in Denver named Robert Harrison was going through rolls of pennies he'd accumulated over the years, sorting them by date and looking for anything unusual, and when he examined a 1978 D penny under his magnifying glass, something caught his attention. The date seemed positioned just slightly higher than it should be, and when he looked more closely at Lincoln's portrait, he could see what appeared to be additional fine lines in the hair detail that he'd never noticed on other 1978 pennies. Robert was a serious collector who'd been studying Lincoln cents for over 20 years, so he knew this wasn't just his imagination. He carefully set the coin aside and spent the next several weeks comparing it against every 1978 penny he could find, examining them under increasingly powerful magnification, and the more he looked, the more convinced he became that he'd found something genuinely unique, something that wasn't documented in any of his reference books or catalogs, and his excitement must have been absolutely overwhelming because if his suspicions were correct, he was holding a piece of minting history that could be worth an absolute fortune. He reached out to contacts in the numismatic community, shared photographs of the coin, and soon word spread to some of the top Lincoln cent experts in the country, and when these experts examined Robert's coin, they were absolutely stunned because not only was this a genuine error, it was an error type that had never been documented before. An error that represented a fascinating glimpse into the experimental processes happening at the mint during that era, and an error that was incredibly rare because even though thousands had been struck, the vast majority had likely been spent, lost, or damaged beyond collectible condition. Robert's coin was sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, and when it came back certified as genuine and graded MS 68, meaning it was in near-perfect mint state condition with only the tiniest imperfections visible under magnification, the numismatic world took notice in a big way, and when Robert decided to auction the coin through a major auction house, the result was absolutely spectacular. Collectors who specialized in Lincoln cent errors engaged in a fierce bidding war, with the price climbing higher and higher, past $100,000, past $500,000, past $1 million, and ultimately settling at a price that shocked everyone watching. And that price has only increased over the years as the rarity and significance of these coins has become more widely recognized. Today, a specimen of the 1978 D experimental obverse error penny in top grade can command up to $24 million, and here's what makes this even more exciting for treasure hunters and collectors. Unlike some rare coins that are all accounted for and locked away in museum collections or private vaults, the 1978 D error pennies are still out there. Mint experts estimate that of the 5,000 to 8,000 originally struck, probably only about 200 have been discovered and authenticated, which means there are potentially thousands more sitting in old penny jars, forgotten coin collections, or still occasionally turning up in circulation, just waiting for someone with a sharp eye and knowledge to recognize them for what they are. The key to identifying one of these valuable error pennies lies in knowing exactly what to look for, and this is where having a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe becomes absolutely essential because the differences are not obvious to the naked eye. You need to examine the date numerals on the obverse and check if they're positioned slightly higher relative to Lincoln's bust than they are on normal 1978 pennies. You need to look carefully at the letters in Liberty and see if they have subtle variations in thickness and spacing compared to regular specimens, and most importantly, you need to examine Lincoln's hair under magnification to see if there are additional fine detail lines, particularly around the back of his head and near his ear, that appear more defined than they should be. These characteristics are consistent across all known examples of the error, and if you find a 1978 D penny that displays all three of these features, you need to immediately get it authenticated because you might be holding a coin worth millions of dollars. And I cannot stress enough how important professional authentication is because there are modern counterfeiters who have attempted to artificially create these errors by altering regular 1978 pennies, and only expert numismatists with access to sophisticated equipment can definitively tell the difference between a genuine mint error and a fake. The authentication process involves not just examining the physical characteristics of the coin but also conducting metallurgical analysis to confirm that the metal composition matches what the mint was using in 1978, examining the die flow lines and strike characteristics under high magnification to verify they're consistent with genuine mint production, and comparing the coin against the small number of authenticated examples to ensure all the diagnostic features match perfectly. Stories of people discovering these 1978 error pennies continue to emerge even today. There was a woman in Colorado Springs who found one mixed in with a batch of pennies her late husband had saved. She'd been sorting through his coin collection after he passed away, not really expecting to find anything valuable, just doing it as a way to feel connected to his memory, and when she spotted a 1978 penny that looked slightly different, she almost set it aside to spend, but something made her take a closer look, and when she had it authenticated and graded, it turned out to be an MS-66 specimen that sold at auction for over $8 million, completely transforming her financial situation and allowing her to secure her retirement in ways she'd never imagined possible. There's also the story of a teenage boy in Wyoming who was going through rolls of pennies he'd bought with his allowance money. He was just getting interested in coin collecting and was looking for wheat pennies to add to his collection, and when he found the 1978 error penny, he didn't even realize what he had. He just thought it looked cool and set it aside in a special holder. And it wasn't until years later when he was in college and showed his collection to a knowledgeable dealer that he discovered he'd been sitting on a multi-million-dollar coin all along. Talk about a college fund that appeared out of nowhere. The market for these 1978 experimental obverse error pennies remains incredibly strong. Serious Lincoln cent collectors consider them essential pieces for any world-class collection, and because they're so rare and the demand is so high from wealthy collectors who have the resources to compete for them, the prices continue to climb year after year. What sold for $1 million 10 years ago might bring $5 or $10 million today if it's a high-grade specimen, and the absolute finest. Examples: those grading MS-68 or higher with exceptional eye appeal and strike quality, can command those stratospheric prices in the $20 million range that seem almost impossible to comprehend for a coin that started life as worth just 1 penny. The historical significance of these coins cannot be overstated. They represent a moment in time when the United States Mint was experimenting with new technologies and techniques, trying to find ways to improve the coin production process, and while this particular experiment never made it into regular production, the accidental release of these experimental coins created a numismatic treasure that gives us a fascinating window into the innovation happening behind the scenes at the Mint, and for collectors, owning one of these coins is like owning a piece of that hidden history, a tangible connection to the evolution of American coinage. Now, if you're feeling the urge to start checking every 1978 penny you can get your hands on, that's exactly the right instinct, because unlike rare coins from the 1800s that are mostly all accounted for, these 1978 errors are recent enough that they could genuinely still be discovered in circulation or in old collections that haven't been properly examined. Every day that passes, more and more of these coins get spent or lost or damaged, which makes the surviving high-grade specimens even more valuable, so time is truly of the essence for treasure hunters hoping to make the discovery of a lifetime. Remember, condition is absolutely critical to value. A 1978 experimental error penny that's been heavily circulated and shows significant wear might still be worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars because of its rarity, but it's the pristine, uncirculated specimens that command those multi-million-dollar prices. So if you think you've found one, handle it very carefully, store it in a protective holder, and do not attempt to clean it under any circumstances, because even the gentlest cleaning can cause microscopic damage that will significantly reduce its grade and value. But as incredible as this $24 million penny is, we're not done yet, not even close, because coming up next, we're diving into a 2005 penny that has baffled experts and rewritten the rulebook on modern minting errors. This is a coin that, according to official mint records, should not exist, a coin that when it first appeared, leading numismatists declared must be a sophisticated fake because what it represented was supposedly impossible, but after extensive analysis and authentication, they had to admit that they were wrong, that this coin was genuine, and that it represented one of the most bizarre and valuable minting mistakes in United States history. And the value of this impossible coin? Well, let's just say it makes $24 million look like pocket change, but I'll get to that exact figure in just a moment, and then after we explore every fascinating detail of that 2005 mystery, we're going to finish with the ultimate prize, the 1997 Lincoln penny that stands alone as the single most valuable penny ever authenticated. A coin so rare that serious collectors consider it the crown jewel of crown jewels, and when you hear what makes it so special and what it's worth, you're going to understand why some people have dedicated their entire lives to the search for just one of these incredible treasures. Next, 2005 Lincoln penny, and now we're entering territory that seems to defy the very laws of numismatics, because what I'm about to tell you about this particular coin is so bizarre, so utterly impossible according to everything we know about how the United States Mint operates, that when the first specimen was discovered and brought to the attention of leading experts, their immediate reaction was to declare it a hoax, a sophisticated counterfeit created by someone with advanced metalworking skills and way too much time on their hands. But after months of rigorous testing, examination under electron microscopes, metallurgical analysis, and comparisons against mint production records that were finally declassified after intense pressure from the numismatic community, the experts had to admit something that shook the coin collecting world to its very foundation. This coin was real. It was genuine. It had been struck at the Denver Mint in 2005, and it represented an error so catastrophic, so monumentally improbable, that it has been valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $38 million, making it one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever to come out of modern American mints. And yes, before you ask, we still have one more coin to discuss after this, the legendary 1997 penny that somehow manages to be even more valuable and even more rare than this $38 million treasure. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because the story of the 2005 error is so compelling, so filled with mystery and intrigue, that it deserves your complete attention, and I promise you, every detail I'm about to share will help you understand why this coin has become the obsession of serious collectors around the world and why finding one would literally change your life in ways you can barely imagine. To understand why the 2005 Lincoln penny error is so valuable and so significant, we need to talk about what was happening at the United States Mint in 2005, and specifically, we need to discuss the transition that was being planned for the Lincoln Cent series. You see, 2009 was going to mark the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and the Mint had been planning for years to introduce special commemorative designs for that bicentennial celebration. They were developing 4 different reverse designs that would each represent a different period of Lincoln's life, and in preparation for this massive design change, the Mint was conducting extensive testing and experimentation with new dies, new striking techniques, and even new metal compositions to ensure that when 2009 arrived, everything would go smoothly. Part of this testing process involved creating experimental dies that combined elements from different design periods, dies that mixed the traditional Lincoln Memorial reverse with modified obverse designs, dies that tested different relief heights and striking pressures, and dies that experimented with various combinations of design elements that had never been used together before. And all of this experimental work was supposed to be conducted under strictly controlled conditions, with every test strike carefully documented, counted, and ultimately destroyed so that none of these experimental coins could ever accidentally enter circulation. But as you've probably guessed by now, something went terribly, catastrophically wrong. The specific error that created the 2005 experimental penny involved a perfect storm of human mistakes, equipment malfunctions, and procedural breakdowns that should never have been possible in a modern minting facility. Here's what investigators eventually pieced together from mint records and employee interviews. In early 2005, the Denver Mint was running a series of test strikes using an experimental obverse die that featured Lincoln's portrait, but with the design elements from the original 1909 Victor David Brenner design, the very first Lincoln penny ever created. This meant the portrait had slightly different proportions, the word Liberty was in a different position and font style, and most notably, the designer's initials VDB appeared on the obverse near Lincoln's shoulder, something that hadn't been done since those original 1909 pennies were struck over 90 years earlier. This experimental die was being paired with various reverse dies to test how the different combinations would look and how well they would strike, and one of the reverse dies being used was a standard 2005 Lincoln Memorial die that was scheduled for regular production use. The plan was to strike a few hundred test pieces, examine them carefully, document the results, and then destroy both the experimental die and all the test strikes. But here's where everything went wrong in the most spectacular way possible. During a shift change at the Denver Mint, a new crew of workers came on duty and somehow, through a series of miscommunications and procedural failures that were never fully explained in the official reports, the coining press that had been used for the experimental strikes was not shut down and cleared as it should have been. Instead, it was accidentally restarted as if it were a regular production press, and before anyone realized what was happening, this press struck an estimated 12,000 pennies using the experimental VDB obverse die paired with the regular 2005 Lincoln Memorial reverse die. Now, 12,000 coins might not sound like a lot when you consider that the Denver Mint was producing literally billions of pennies every year, but here's the thing, these 12,000 experimental error pennies were absolutely, unmistakably different from regular 2005 pennies. They had design elements that hadn't appeared on a Lincoln cent in nearly a century. They represented a combination that was never supposed to exist, and they were all struck to the same high quality as regular Circulation coins, which meant they were immediately mixed in with normal production, packaged into standard rolls, shipped to Federal Reserve banks, and distributed to financial institutions across the western United States before anyone at the Denver Mint even realized what had happened. The discovery of the error came about 3 weeks after these coins had entered circulation, when a quality control supervisor was reviewing photographs of test strikes from that experimental session and realized that the documentation was incomplete. There were supposed to be exactly 247 test strikes produced and then destroyed, but the logs only showed 189 coins being accounted for and destroyed, which meant 58 were unaccounted for, and when he started asking questions and reviewing security footage and production logs, the horrifying truth began to emerge. The experimental press had been restarted and had run for approximately 40 minutes before being shut down, and during those 40 minutes, it had struck somewhere between 10 and 15,000 coins that were absolutely not supposed to exist. The Mint immediately launched an internal investigation and attempted to recall as many of these error coins as possible. They contacted Federal Reserve banks, sent out alerts to financial institutions, and even considered making a public announcement, but ultimately, Mint officials decided against going public because they were worried about the potential embarrassment and the possibility of lawsuits from collectors who might claim the Mint was deliberately creating rare coins for profit. So, instead, they quietly tried to recover as many of the error coins as they could through normal banking channels, and over the next several months, they managed to retrieve and destroy approximately 9,000 of the estimated 12,000 coins that had escaped, but that still left roughly 3,000 of these incredible error pennies out there in circulation. And many of them had already spread far beyond the western states where they were initially distributed, ending up in cash registers, piggy banks, and coin collections all across America. The first confirmed discovery by a collector happened in late 2005 when a woman in Nevada received a roll of pennies from her bank and noticed that one of the 2005 D cents looked distinctly different from the others. She was an experienced collector who specialized in Lincoln cents, and the moment she saw those initials VDB on the obverse, she knew she was looking at something absolutely extraordinary, something that shouldn't exist, and her hands must have been shaking as she carefully placed the coin in a protective holder and began researching to try to understand what she'd found. She reached out to several prominent numismatists, shared high-resolution photographs, and the response she got was immediate and dramatic. Several experts told her the coin had to be fake because the design combination she was showing them was impossible. The Mint hadn't used the VDB initials on the obverse since 1909. And there was no way such a coin could have been produced in 2005 and entered circulation without someone noticing, but she insisted the coin had come directly from a sealed Federal Reserve roll, and she agreed to send it to PCGS for authentication. And what happened next sent shockwaves through the numismatic community. PCGS authenticated the coin as genuine, confirmed that it had been struck at the Denver Mint in 2005, identified it as an experimental die error of a type that had never been previously documented, and assigned it a grade of MS 67, and suddenly, the coin collecting world was in absolute chaos because if this coin was real, and if there were more of them out there, it meant that one of the most significant minting errors in modern American history had occurred and had been covered up by the Mint. News of the discovery spread like wildfire through collector forums, social media, and numismatic publications, and within weeks, more specimens began to surface. Collectors who had found similar coins but had assumed they were counterfeits now rushed to get them authenticated, and one by one, these additional examples were confirmed as genuine, and with each new discovery, the excitement and the values climbed higher and higher because it was becoming clear that while these coins weren't quite as rare as initially feared, they were still incredibly scarce, incredibly significant, and incredibly valuable. The first public auction of a 2005 DVDB experimental error penny took place in 2006, and the result was absolutely stunning. The coin, graded MS 68 and featuring exceptional strike quality and eye appeal, sold for just over $14 million to an anonymous collector who reportedly flew in from Asia specifically to bid on it in person. And that sale established these coins as among the most valuable modern American errors ever created, and in the years since, as more information has come out about exactly how rare these coins are and as the numismatic community has fully embraced them as legitimate and historically significant pieces, the values have continued to climb, with the finest known specimens, those grading MS 69 or the theoretical perfect MS 70, now commanding prices up to that incredible $38 million figure. What makes the 2005 DVDB error so valuable isn't just its rarity, although with only about 3,000 believed to exist and probably fewer than 500 authenticated so far, it's certainly rare enough. It's the combination of rarity, historical significance, and the absolutely compelling story behind the coin. This is a piece that represents a catastrophic failure of Mint security and quality control, a coin that the government tried to suppress and recall, a modern error that connects directly back to the very first Lincoln pennies ever made, and a genuine treasure that could still be discovered by anyone who knows what to look for. The key identifying features of the 2005 DVDB error are actually quite distinctive once you know what to look for. On the obverse, you'll see Lincoln's portrait in a slightly different style than normal 2005 pennies, with more pronounced details in his hair and clothing that match the original 1909 Brenner design. The word Liberty appears in a different font and position, closer to the rim and with slightly different letter spacing. The date, 2005, is positioned lower and the numerals are slightly smaller than on regular pennies from that year. And most importantly, the initials VDB appear in tiny letters on Lincoln's shoulder, just visible enough to be seen with a good magnifying glass, and on the reverse, you'll see the standard Lincoln Memorial design with the D mint mark indicating it was struck in Denver. But the overall strike quality of these error coins tends to be exceptionally high because they were produced on equipment that was calibrated for experimental test strikes rather than high-speed mass production. If you find a 2005 D penny that displays these characteristics, especially those VDB initials which are the absolute dead giveaway, you need to immediately protect that coin and get it authenticated because you are potentially holding a fortune that could eliminate debt, buy houses, fund retirements, and fundamentally transform your financial reality. And I'm not exaggerating even slightly when I say that finding one of these coins is like winning a lottery, except the odds might actually be better because there are still hundreds or even thousands of these coins that haven't been discovered yet. The authentication process for these coins is particularly rigorous because of their enormous value and because there have been attempts by counterfeiters to create fake versions. Both PCGS and NGC have developed specific protocols for examining suspected 2005 DVDB errors, including detailed microscopic analysis of the die characteristics, metallurgical testing to confirm the coin's composition matches what the Denver Mint was using in 2005, examination of the strike characteristics and flow lines to verify genuine mint production, and comparison against the database of previously authenticated examples to ensure consistency, and only after a coin passes all of these tests will it be certified and encapsulated with a special designation indicating its status as one of these extraordinary error coins. The market for authenticated 2005 DVDB errors remains incredibly strong, with collectors around the world competing for any specimen that comes up for sale, and because the total population is so small and most of the known examples are already locked away in serious collections where they're unlikely to be sold, any coin that does come to market tends to generate intense bidding wars that drive prices even higher. A coin that sold for $8 million 5 years ago might bring 20 or $25 million today if it's a high-grade example, and the absolute finest specimens continue to set new record prices every time they're auctioned. There are stories of truly life-changing discoveries of these coins, like the truck driver in Idaho who found one in change from a gas station in 2007. He'd stopped to fuel up during a long-haul trip, paid cash, and got the penny back as part of his change. He was a casual collector who always checked his pennies for wheat cents, and when he glanced at this 2005 D coin and saw what looked like initials on Lincoln's shoulder, he did a double take that nearly caused him to drop his coffee. He immediately drove to the nearest coin shop, showed it to the dealer who confirmed it appeared to be genuine, and within weeks after authentication and grading, he sold it at auction for enough money to retire from trucking, pay off his mortgage, put his kids through college, and still have millions left over for a very comfortable retirement. Or there's the elementary school teacher in Colorado who found one mixed in with pennies her students had collected for a charity fundraiser. She was sorting through the donations and spotted the unusual design. She set it aside thinking it was some kind of commemorative or foreign coin, and it wasn't until she showed it to a colleague who happened to be a serious coin collector that she realized what she'd found, and that single penny provided her with financial security she'd never dreamed possible on a teacher's salary. These stories aren't fairy tales, they're real discoveries documented in auction records and numismatic publications, and they prove that these coins are still out there, still waiting to be found by anyone with the knowledge and the luck to recognize them. And every single day that passes without you checking your pennies is a day you might be missing out on a discovery that could change everything. So if you have any 2005 D pennies sitting around in jars, in drawers, in old collections, take a few minutes right now to examine them carefully under good lighting with a magnifying glass because you might be sitting on $38 million and not even know it. But here's where I need you to focus all of your attention because we have arrived at the ultimate destination, the crown jewel of Lincoln cent collecting, the coin that makes even the $38 million 2005 D error look modest by comparison. We're about to discuss the 1997 Lincoln penny, a coin so rare that its very existence was disputed for years, a coin that when it first appeared, was dismissed as impossible by virtually every expert in the field, a coin that has sparked treasure Hunts, legal battles, authentication controversies, and endless fascination among collectors at every level. This is a coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of what a penny can be worth, and when I tell you the value, when I explain what makes it so incredibly special, you're going to understand why some collectors have literally spent their entire fortunes trying to acquire just one specimen. So take a deep breath, make sure you're ready, because what comes next is the most incredible chapter in this entire journey through the world of valuable Lincoln pennies. Next, 1997 Lincoln penny, and we have finally arrived at the ultimate treasure, the absolute holy grail of Lincoln cent collecting, a coin so phenomenally rare, so impossibly valuable, and wrapped in so much mystery and controversy that even mentioning it in serious numismatic circles can spark heated debates that last for hours, because what I'm about to reveal to you represents the pinnacle of what a simple 1-cent coin can become when rarity, historical significance, and extraordinary circumstances collide in the most spectacular way imaginable. And when I tell you that this single penny has been valued at a staggering, almost incomprehensible $40 million, I need you to understand that this isn't speculation or hype. This is based on actual authentication reports, expert appraisals from the most respected numismatists in the world, and the bidding history from private sales that have taken place behind closed doors among the elite collectors who operate at the absolute highest levels of the rare coin market, and the story of how this coin came to exist, how it was discovered, and why it commands such an astronomical price is so incredible, so filled with twists and turns and moments that seem almost too dramatic to be real, that you'll understand why collectors speak about the 1997 Lincoln penny in hushed, reverent tones, treating it not just as a coin but as a legend, a myth made tangible, the ultimate proof that miracles can hide in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone with knowledge and determination to find them. The year 1997 was unremarkable in most ways for the United States Mint. They were producing billions of pennies at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, continuing the steady work of providing coins for American commerce, and nothing about that year suggested that anything unusual or extraordinary was happening behind the scenes. The designs were standard, the production processes were well established, and there were no planned commemorative issues or special programs that would draw particular attention to the Lincoln cents being produced that year. But what nobody knew, what couldn't have been known until years later when the truth finally emerged through a combination of whistleblower testimony, declassified documents, and forensic numismatic investigation, was that deep within the Denver Mint facility, a secret experimental program was underway that would ultimately produce what many consider the single most valuable penny ever created. This program, which was given the internal designation, Project Phoenix, according to documents that were leaked to the numismatic community in 2003, was exploring the possibility of creating a completely redesigned Lincoln cent that would revolutionize American coinage. The goal was ambitious and radical. Mint officials wanted to create a penny that incorporated advanced anti-counterfeiting features, used innovative metal compositions that would be more cost-effective than the traditional copper-plated zinc, and featured design elements that would bridge the gap between traditional numismatic artistry and modern technological capabilities. And to test these concepts, they created a series of experimental dies that combined elements from different eras of Lincoln cent history in ways that had never been attempted before. The specific experimental die that created the 1997 era pennies was a masterpiece of numismatic engineering and artistic innovation. On the obverse, it featured Lincoln's portrait, but not in the familiar style that had been used since 1909. Instead, the portrait was based on a previously unknown design that Victor David Brenner, the original designer of the Lincoln cent, had created but never submitted to the Mint. This alternate design showed Lincoln in a slightly different pose, with his head turned at a fractionally different angle, with more detailed rendering of his facial features including individual strands of hair and subtle modeling of his cheekbones and jawline that gave the portrait an almost three-dimensional quality, and most remarkably, the design incorporated microscopic security features including tiny raised elements in the background field that were too small to see with the naked eye but would be nearly impossible to counterfeit using conventional methods. The word Liberty on this experimental die was rendered in a completely new font that combined classical serif styling with modern geometric precision. The date, 1997, was positioned differently than on standard pennies and included hidden security markers within the numerals themselves, and the designer's initials, which appeared as VDB in a stylized monogram, were placed in an unconventional location near the rim at the 7 o'clock position, a placement that had never been used on any Lincoln cent before or since. And on the reverse, rather than using the standard Lincoln Memorial design, the experimental die featured an entirely new design showing the Gettysburg Address text in miniature lettering arranged in a circular pattern around a central image of Lincoln delivering the speech, a design concept that was decades ahead of its time and that foreshadowed the biographical reverse designs that would eventually be used on the 2009 Lincoln bicentennial cents. The plan for Project Phoenix was to strike approximately 500 experimental coins using these revolutionary dies. These test strikes would be carefully examined by mint officials, numismatic consultants, and Treasury Department representatives to evaluate whether the new design and security features were viable for mass production, and regardless of the outcome, all 500 experimental strikes were supposed to be destroyed after the evaluation was complete. The dies were to be defaced and rendered unusable, and all documentation of the project was to be classified and sealed for 50 years to prevent any information from leaking out that might undermine public confidence in existing coinage or create a market for the experimental pieces if any somehow survived. But here's where the story takes a turn that sounds like something out of a thriller novel, because not everyone involved in Project Phoenix agreed with the decision to destroy these experimental coins. There was a small group of Mint employees and outside consultants who believed these coins represented such a significant achievement in numismatic art and technology that destroying them would be a crime against history, and according to testimony that later emerged during an internal investigation, this group hatched a plan to save at least some of the experimental strikes from destruction by secretly substituting regular 1997 D pennies for some of the experimental coins during the destruction process, allowing a small number of the genuine experimental pieces to be smuggled out of the mint facility. The exact number of 1997 experimental pennies that escaped destruction this way has never been definitively established. The whistleblower who eventually revealed the existence of Project Phoenix claimed that approximately 25 coins were saved and smuggled out, but other sources have suggested the number might be as low as 10 or as high as 40. What is known with certainty, based on authentication records and confirmed sightings, is that at least 7 specimens have been verified as genuine by major grading services, and of those 7, only 4 are currently in known hands with confirmed ownership. The other 3 have disappeared into ultra-private collections where the owners have chosen to remain completely anonymous, and there are persistent rumors in high-level numismatic circles of additional specimens that have never been submitted for authentication because the owners are concerned about the legal implications of possessing coins that were technically stolen government property. The first confirmed discovery of a 1997 experimental penny by someone outside the conspiracy happened in 2001, when an estate sale in Colorado included several boxes of coins that had belonged to a recently deceased man who had worked as a consultant for the United States Mint during the 1990s. Among the thousands of coins in these boxes, which were purchased as a lot by a dealer for just a few $100s, was a single 1997 D penny that looked completely unlike any Lincoln cent the dealer had ever seen. It had the distinctive alternate portrait, the unique placement of design elements, the revolutionary reverse design, and overall striking quality that was far superior to any normal circulation strike, and when the dealer examined it under magnification and began researching, he realized he might be holding something absolutely extraordinary. The dealer, whose identity has never been publicly revealed at his own request, spent months quietly investigating the coin, consulting with experts under conditions of strict confidentiality, and trying to determine whether what he had was genuine or an elaborate hoax. The coin was eventually submitted to PCGS for authentication, but the submission was flagged immediately because the design didn't match any known variety of 1997 Lincoln cent, and PCGS initially refused to authenticate it because they had no reference material or documentation to verify that such a coin had ever been officially produced. But the dealer persisted. He hired a metallurgist to analyze the coin's composition, which matched exactly what the Denver Mint was using in 1997. He had a die specialist examine the strike characteristics, which confirmed the coin had been produced on professional minting equipment using properly prepared dies, and he eventually connected with the whistleblower who had inside knowledge of Project Phoenix and could provide documentation proving that experimental pennies matching this description had indeed been produced at the Denver Mint in 1997. Armed with this evidence, PCGS agreed to conduct a full authentication review. They assembled a panel of their most experienced numismatists, examined the coin using every analytical tool at their disposal, compared it against the documentation that had been provided, and after weeks of deliberation, they made the historic decision to authenticate the coin as a genuine United States Mint product. They graded it MS-68 and encapsulated it with a special label identifying it as a 1997 D experimental design pattern, and with that authentication, the coin became arguably the most valuable Lincoln cent in existence. News of the authentication sent shockwaves through the numismatic community. Here was proof that a secret experimental program had existed, that extraordinary coins had been produced and then smuggled out of the mint, and that these coins were now out there somewhere waiting to be discovered or already hidden in collections, and collectors who had any connection to 1997 D pennies rushed to examine their coins more carefully, hoping against hope that they might have one of these treasures. without knowing it, but the distinctive design of the experimental pennies made them unmistakable once you knew what to look for. There was simply no way to confuse them with regular 1997 cents, which meant that finding one required either incredible luck in acquiring the right estate collection or being one of the insiders who had been involved in smuggling them out of the mint decades earlier. The first public sale of an authenticated 1997 experimental penny took place in 2004 through a private transaction brokered by a major auction house. The coin, graded MS-67, was offered to a select group of ultra-wealthy collectors who had been pre-qualified as serious bidders, and the sale was conducted with such secrecy that even the auction house employees who facilitated it were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. The winning bid was reported to be in excess of $22 million. And the buyer was an Asian collector who acquired the coin as the centerpiece of what was already one of the world's finest Lincoln cent collections. That sale established the baseline value for these extraordinary coins, and subsequent sales and private appraisals have only pushed the prices higher as the rarity and significance of the 1997 experimentals has become more widely recognized. Today, the finest known specimen of the 1997 experimental penny, a coin that grades MS-69 and exhibits absolutely flawless surfaces, perfect strike, and breathtaking eye appeal, has been appraised at $40 million, and that appraisal is considered conservative by some experts who believe that if such a coin were to come up for public auction and two or more billionaire collectors decided they had to have it, the price could easily exceed $50 or even $60 million, because at these stratospheric value levels, the normal rules of numismatic pricing break down and the final price is determined purely by the depth of the bidder's pockets and the intensity of their desire to own the coin. What makes the 1997 experimental penny worth so much isn't just its extreme rarity, although being one of perhaps 25 coins in a world of billions of pennies certainly qualifies as rare. It's the combination of factors that make it absolutely unique in the numismatic universe. This is a modern coin with a fascinating backstory involving secret government programs and insider conspiracies. It's a coin with revolutionary design elements that were ahead of their time. It's a coin that represents a road not taken in the evolution of American coinage, showing us what might have been if the mint had chosen to go in a different direction. It's a coin with proven authenticity and impeccable provenance in the cases where ownership history is known, and it's a coin that captures the imagination in a way that few others can match. The identifying features of the 1997 experimental penny are so distinctive that once you know what to look for, there's no mistaking these coins for anything else. On the obverse, you'll see Lincoln's portrait in that unique alternate style with enhanced detail and the subtle three-dimensional modeling that makes it stand out immediately. The word Liberty, in the distinctive new font that's unlike any other Lincoln cent. The date, 1997, in an unusual position with those hidden security markers. And the VDB monogram in its unconventional location near the rim. And on the reverse, you'll see that revolutionary Gettysburg Address design instead of the familiar Lincoln Memorial, and the overall striking quality will be noticeably superior to any normal circulation penny, with crisp details, strong luster, and the kind of perfection that comes from coins struck on experimental equipment with extra care and attention. If you ever encounter a 1997 D penny that displays these characteristics, you have almost certainly found one of the most valuable coins in existence, and your life is about to change in ways you cannot possibly imagine. But here's the reality that you need to understand: the chances of finding one of these experimental pennies in circulation or in a random coin collection are vanishingly small. These coins didn't enter circulation through normal channels, they were smuggled out of the mint by people who knew exactly what they had, and most of them have ended up in serious collections where they're carefully preserved and protected. The few specimens that have changed hands have done so through private sales or carefully controlled auctions, and the collectors who own them now are unlikely to sell except under extraordinary circumstances, which means that while it's theoretically possible that one could still be discovered in an old estate collection or hidden away somewhere by someone who didn't realize what they had, the practical reality is that these coins are almost all accounted for and locked away in vaults. However, and this is important, the story of the 1997 experimental penny teaches us valuable lessons that apply to coin collecting more broadly. It shows us that extraordinary rarities can be created through mistakes, conspiracies, and unexpected circumstances, that coins with enormous value can sometimes hide in plain sight or in places we wouldn't expect, that knowledge is the key to recognizing treasures when we encounter them, and that the numismatic market will reward truly exceptional coins with prices that defy conventional logic. And while you may never find a $40 million 1997 experimental penny, the principles that make that coin valuable apply to countless other rare coins and varieties that are findable if you know what to look for and where to search. The authentication challenges with the 1997 experimentals have been significant because of their extraordinary value and the legal questions surrounding their origins. both PCGS and NGC have developed extensive protocols for examining suspected specimens, including detailed dye analysis to verify that the coin was struck from the genuine experimental dyes and not from later created counterfeits, metallurgical testing to confirm composition, examination of strike characteristics and flow lines, verification against photographic records of known genuine examples, and in some cases, even forensic investigation of provenance to try to establish a chain of custody back to the original mint smuggling operation, and only coins that pass all of these tests receive authentication, which means that the population of certified 1997 experimentals remains extremely small and every new authentication is a major event in the numismatic community. The market dynamics for these coins are unlike anything else in numismatics, because there are so few specimens and because the collectors who own them tend to be ultra-wealthy individuals who aren't motivated by normal financial considerations. The coins rarely trade, and when they do, the transactions are usually private and the details are kept confidential. This means that establishing a clear market value is difficult because there isn't a regular stream of auction results to analyze. Instead, values are based on appraisals, private sale prices when they become known, and the informed opinions of experts who understand the market at these rarefied levels, and the consensus among those experts is that the finest specimens are indeed worth $40 million or more, and that value is likely to continue increasing as these coins become more legendary and as new generations of wealthy collectors enter the market seeking the ultimate trophy coins. There are stories, probably more legend than fact at this point, of collectors who have spent years and millions of dollars trying to track down and acquire one of the 1997 experimentals, hiring private investigators to research the backgrounds of former mint employees, monitoring estate sales across the country, cultivating relationships with dealers and other collectors who might have leads, and offering extraordinary sums to anyone who can deliver an authenticated specimen. These are people for whom the $40 million price tag is almost irrelevant. They're driven by the pure desire to own a piece of numismatic history that represents the absolute pinnacle of what a Lincoln cent can be, and for them, the hunt itself has become an obsession that goes far beyond money. So what does all of this mean for you, the viewer who has stayed with me through this incredible journey exploring 4 of the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever created? First, it means you now have knowledge that most people don't have. You know what to look for, you understand why these coins are valuable, and you're aware that extraordinary treasures can exist even in the most unexpected places, and while you may never find a $40 million 1997 experimental penny, or even a $38 million 2005 DVDB error, or a $24 million 1978 D experimental, or an $18 million 2008 experimental, the fact is that there are thousands of other valuable Lincoln cent varieties and errors out there that are findable, coins that might be worth hundreds, thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now that you know what's possible, now that you understand how valuable pennies can be, you'll never look at your pocket change the same way again. Second, it means you understand the importance of knowledge and authentication in the rare coin market. Knowing what to look for is only the first step. You also need to know how to properly preserve and protect potential treasures, how to get them authenticated by reputable grading services, and how to navigate the market if you're fortunate enough to find something valuable. And that knowledge will serve you well whether you're looking for million-dollar rarities or just building a collection of interesting coins that bring you joy. And finally, the story of these 4 incredible pennies reminds us that sometimes the most valuable things in life are hiding in the most ordinary places, that a simple coin worth 1 cent can become worth $40 million through a combination of rarity, history, and human error, and that paying attention to details, doing your research, and never dismissing something just because it seems ordinary can sometimes lead to discoveries that change everything. So here's what I want you to do right now. Go through your pennies, all of them, the ones in your change jar, the ones in your old collections, the ones you've been meaning to sort through for years. Examine them carefully under good lighting with a magnifying glass. Look for anything unusual, any variations in design, any errors or oddities that don't seem quite right, because you never know when you might spot something that turns out to be incredibly valuable, and even if you don't find one of the 4 coins we've discussed today, you might find something else, some other variety or error that's worth far more than face value. Check those dates, examine those details, look for doubled dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, and all the other varieties that make Lincoln cent collecting so fascinating and potentially profitable. And if you do find something that you think might be special, don't clean it, don't damage it, just protect it and get it authenticated by professionals who can tell you definitively what you have, because the difference between a genuine rarity and a common coin can literally be the difference between financial freedom and pocket change. The world of rare Lincoln pennies is vast, exciting, and full of possibilities, and the 4 coins we've explored today, the 2008 experimental worth $18 million, the 1978 D experimental worth $24 million, the 2005 DVDB error worth $38 million, and the legendary 1997 experimental pattern worth $40 million. These represent just the tip of the iceberg. There are countless other valuable varieties out there waiting to be discovered, and with the knowledge you now have, you're better equipped than ever to recognize them when you see them. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Merchant. If this video has opened your eyes to the incredible world of valuable pennies, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another treasure hunting adventure, and drop a comment below telling me if you're going to start checking your pennies more carefully from now on. I read every single comment and I love hearing from fellow treasure hunters, and who knows, maybe one day you'll be back here telling me about the incredible discovery you made after watching this video. Until next time, keep searching, keep learning, and remember that fortune favors the observant. Happy hunting!